Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Beyond Belief with Nuria Khan. About a year ago, I was deliberating the trajectory of the West in general, but more so the direction that the UK was heading. And I was joined by Haris Sultan as we discussed whether or not we thought Australia was just lagging a couple of years behind Britain. Today, I thought we'd pick up that conversation because things have escalated quite a bit since then, not to mention the Bondi Beach horrific terrorist incident. And so we're just going to discuss the current state of affairs in Australia compared to how they were a year ago and compare and contrast that with what we're seeing play out on the streets of Britain today. And not just in the streets of Britain, but within Parliament itself, because I feel like the topic of Islam is now being uttered on the lips of politicians far more than before. And I've got my own theories as to why that is and why it's coming to the forefront and how important the next election will be. So without further ado, Haris Sultan, friend of the channel, welcome back. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you? Thank you for having me again.
Thank you for being here. So, Haris, recently I've noticed a trend amongst, not mainstream media, of course, but our channels that are right of center, i.e. TalkTV, GB News, and not even GB News, I feel like even they've kind of recoiled a bit, but TalkTV have been platforming somebody very famous from your neck of the woods, Pauline Hanson, who I think has been banging the drum about Islam since potentially before I was born. But I came across this interview the other day and you did spring to mind. So I just thought if we could give this a listen together and you give me your thoughts on what she's saying and how much of it rings true for what's happening in Australia at the minute.
Pauline Hanson, when she started her career back in the 80s or early 90s, she wasn't really talking about Islam at that point. At that point, she was just talking about immigration in general, like Enoch Powell in a way. So she was just talking about preserving Australian values, Australian culture, when nobody could talk about that. And because there was no risk apparent at that point.
Yeah, sure. Okay, and I do also have my thoughts on kind of her redemption arc, so to speak, but I'm sure that will come up as the video carries on, because again, she's being completely normalized and demystified as this boogie woman figure in the UK. So let's hear why TalkTV are even bringing Australia into the equation in the first place. Have a listen to this, Haris.
Australia is a country that I love and admire, and it's a country that has finally woken up to the nightmare of net zero, wokery in its public institutions, and open borders. One of the main reasons why it's woken up is the loud, powerful, and fearless voice of Pauline Hanson, leader and founder of One Nation. She joins me now. Hi, Pauline.
Hi, Mark. And I just want to wish everyone a happy Easter of the day.
Well, it's wonderful to have you on the show. Are you sure you're not going to get cancelled for using the word Easter?
Oh, God, no. I say what I want to say. So anyway,
have you seen the dilution of Christianity in Australia in the way that we have here in the UK?
Not to that extent, not yet. But if we keep going the way we are, we will. So anyway, I really feel for Britain and the way your country's gone. And that's why I keep fighting the way that I do and against Islam and its beliefs. It's not compatible with Christianity. It's not compatible with our culture and our way of life. And that's why I'm going to keep opposing it.
Do you make a distinction, Pauline, between so-called radical Islam or Islamism and the moderate Muslim faith?
Very good question, because what I've learned and read about it, that the people of Islam, belief and faith, will actually working with you to befriend you, do whatever they want to do, need to do, to actually get into their communities, become members of parliament, grow their numbers, and then one day it's going to go whack and you won't know what's happened to you. And that's what I see what's happening. You know, I feel for Britain, when I see the number of Muslims in Trafalgar Square praying there, it's about dominance. They're sending a clear message. We're taking your country and you've got nothing to do about it and you can't say or do anything about it. And that's why the people are rising up against it. And that's how I see it. And that's why my push to say hang on a minute, if you want to come here, don't wear the burqa, you respect our laws, you treat it the same as every other Australian, but don't go out thinking you're going to bring in Sharia law into our country, because I'll oppose it.
So, Harris, I just want to stop there for a second because there's a lot of actually politicians in the UK who came down hard on MPs like Nick Timothy, who has been very vocal about the rising kind of Islamism within the UK. But just because he called out Trafalgar Square for being an act of dominance, he got shut down by so many people even asking him to resign based on him making a racist comment like that, which obviously we know isn't true. But even Pauline Hanson is calling it an act of domination in Trafalgar Square. Do you agree with what she said so far? Do you have any comments on what she's like, her estimation?
Oh no, absolutely. We've been saying this far more explicitly and longer than Pauline has been saying it. It is an act of domination. It is an announcement. There is a reason why they do it in front of landmarks, churches. Something must be seriously wrong with you if you still cannot see what is actually happening. And especially in the UK, it's going from bad to worse every single day, every single week. Something else is now happening. And it's not just Islam, but the UK, it looks like everything's falling apart. We had those, I don't know, that unrest / riot / looting in Clapham. And then we had another video just came out a couple of days ago. We had exactly the same thing happen somewhere in Melbourne. I don't know whether that was Werribee Shopping Centre or Southland, irrelevant. It was one of our shopping centres where...
Is that the video where people were marching through with the Palestine flags and chanting?
No, that's from last year. But there was another one that just came out on, that happened on the 2nd of April. So we're starting to see that here in Australia, and it is uncomfortable. It is very difficult. I can see those people, our mainstream media, and a lot of people, even the Australian culture is slightly different from that of Britain, but it still is like people in the West all around have been somehow defanged, and they've been brainwashed into believing that certain things can never be said. But I still believe, because of a subtle cultural difference, Australia is tackling this problem slightly more differently. And that explains Pauline Hanson's very sudden rise. I think in Queensland, which is her own state, her native state, she's become the most popular political party. In South Australia, we had state election a couple of weeks ago. In terms of actual number of votes, a party got second number of most votes in the state. However, it didn't really translate into number of seats. I think she only got about 2 or 3 seats maybe, whereas Labor got 31 seats or something.
But I just wanted to say, like, I've obviously, on the point of domination, a lot of people will argue that we're fear-mongering and saying that praying outside like that is an act of domination, and, you know, this is just a kind of a far-right position to take. But I spent a lot of time in the Middle East and across Saudi Arabia and Dubai, and in all my time there, I've never seen people like mass congregate in an open air setting like this in such a symbolic place to offer their prayers. And you've also spent time in Pakistan when you grew up, and I'm sure, correct me if I'm wrong, is it just the mosques would sometimes overspill onto the public sphere, but you're not actually meeting up somewhere outside of a mosque to kind of do this? Am I correct in saying that?
Only during the Eid prayers, but
that's a spillover effect, right? Like adjacent to a mosque usually.
Yes. Yeah. So yes, it's a spillover effect during Eid prayers only, but not on Friday prayers or any other time, because people would actually complain that most of the time half the mosques are actually empty. So it is an act of domination. They are in a foreign country. I mean, come on, like, you still can't tell? You still cannot see what is happening? Surely you can. And Pauline Hanson's right on point. And I don't think it needs to be said. It's so obvious now.
And on that point as well, I was actually looking into the Islamic scripture myself just to justify whether, according to Sunni Islam and in the hadiths of Islam, has Muhammad ever said anything about doing this and exerting Islam in the public sphere and praying outside. And genuinely, there is nothing to suggest that. But Muslims tried to argue with me on X, being like, this is normal and it's a normal part of Islam, because what is commanded in Islam is that you stop and pray wherever you are if it is prayer time and if you are able to offer it. And the other thing that I think is interesting is that there is a hadith which Muhammad has said, Allah or God has made the earth a place of prayer and worship for him, the entire earth.
Only for him.
Only for him. That's true.
Because
Exactly.
he was that's the point where they actually get caught up on, because Muhammad specifically boastfully said that I am different from Jews and Christians because Allah has made the entire earth for me to pray on. So that's the reason why Muslims actually feel so confident, and they're like, okay, even though we are on infidel land, we can pray here. That's why we see it's an act of domination. And I think it has turned into an act of domination. It has turned into an act of, it's a statement that we are here now. And, you know, Muslims have this massive complex. They believe very steadfastly in their faith. They think that they have to announce it to the world, and they believe that they have to export it to the whole world. Again, we're not saying anything that is from the secret archives of Muslim libraries in Egypt or Saudi Arabia. They say it openly. We literally have got hundreds, and I play those videos every single day in my in my videos. It's time to face the music, basically.
Absolutely. The only other thing I would say on that, Haris, before we move on, is that I have come to the conclusion since having left Islam that when you do talk about things like prayer and the fact that it is dominated predominantly by men, because women should be largely praying at home and not be seen in public in the same manner, it is essentially like, in this English context, it is men of young fighting age coming together in one place. And if you look at Islam in general, because there's such a political aspect to the quote unquote religion, for me, it's like the call to prayer is almost like the roll call, and offering your prayer is like you swearing allegiance to this faith. And we see that when Sadiq Khan stands up and says, it's tough being a Muslim, and he's come out and slagged Donald Trump off by saying that he's Islamophobic and he's anti-Muslim. All of these men that are doing this act of prayer in public also hold their religion above everything. And this isn't just only like a male problem. We see this with Shabana Mahmood and other Muslim politicians as well, that their faith comes before everything. But I think particularly in this public prayer kind of exhibitionist type nature that they've got going on, it is to show, look how many men we've got and look how much we can congregate, goes very much hand in hand with Muhammad Hijab's rhetoric over the years of Muslim gangsters and these are our areas and, you know, don't mess with us. It's very suspicious and it's very nefarious when you think of why are they building gyms next to mosques, and why are they telling all the young Muslims who go to mosques to also be very gym savvy and things like that. I do understand the fear of native English people when they think, what is going on here and why do you feel the need to do that? Anyway, let's get back to this video. You said something really interesting, Haris, and I do want to pick up on that more when you said that Australia is handling this rising Islamization in a slightly different manner to the UK. So I'd love to hear more about that as we carry on.
And can you tell me how much of the Australian population is made up of Muslims now? Is the rise of radical Islam an issue in Australia?
It's about 4%, Mark. We've got about 1 million Muslims in the country, over 28 million population. And we've seen a rise of it in some of these federal electorates where 30% of the vote is actually Muslim. And you see it increasing all the time.
And it affects democratic outcomes, which is a concern.
Of course it does. And you have to be realistic about it. And I think what happened last December with the Bondi attack, and 15 Australians were killed there by these two Islamic, who were radicals in the country. But it's not the first attack that we've had, terrorist attack in Australia. So, we have to be mindful of that. You've got about 18,000. There's 200 people on the watch list in Australia. And then you've got another who are being watched, and then there's another 18,000 watched by ASIO as well. So we do have a problem in Australia, and it's a growing problem, and we need to be mindful of it and make sure we're on top of it so it doesn't impact our country and our way of life.
So notwithstanding the relatively small numbers at this stage, do you have concerns about the so-called Islamification of Australia?
Of course, any country should. Canada has gone that way, that it's very much been dominated by these Islamic organisations, these clerics and the imams. We've got hate speech on our streets, and yet they don't seem to be pulled up. I see it growing, and my concern is what's been taught in the Islamic schools. It is a real problem, and if we look at history, what's happened to Egypt, Lebanon, these countries that were Christian countries, they were taken over slowly, but they were taken over. America, the Europe problems with it over there. Around the world, we see these problems happening. And I'll go back to, England. It's a real problem over there, and I see it constantly all the time. It disturbs me, and that's why I'm adamant that I will keep calling it out in Australia.
Have you
So, Harris, you've also been documenting what's been happening in England, and you were always kind of issuing warnings to your own Australia. Is that do you agree with what she's saying there then?
Yeah, look, I've been saying that since 2021. First time when I really observed England up close and personal. First time I came to England in 2017, but at that point I didn't really quite grasp the scale of the Islamization of the UK. I did see East London at that time, and I was like, oh, okay, it's a bit different from the Muslim suburbs of Melbourne, and maybe I'm not that familiar with Sydney at that point, but Sydney was starting to make some noise at that point, but nothing remotely close to what I saw in East London. But anyway, life goes on, and then when I came back to England and I got stuck there during COVID in 2021, that's when I realized the true scale of what was happening. There was no attempt by the government to stop the ghettoization, to integrate these people. And at that time, we were busy with debunking Daniel Hikikachus and Muhammad Hijabs and Speaker's Corner or whatnot. We were more interested in the theological aspect of it, or debunking of Islam, being an ex-Muslim. But something else was taking place, which I was observing. And that's when I started making solo videos in 2021 or 2022, maybe. And I'd been nonstop repeating that whatever happened in the UK is going to happen here. And something happened after COVID. Now we see places in Melbourne and Sydney where you don't see Aussies. A report came out a few days ago that said nearly 40,000 Australians have left Sydney and 8,000 Australians have left Melbourne. It's the classic 101 case of the white flight, and it's happening. It's the same thing that's happening here. Now we're going to see enclaves like we have seen in the UK, in East London or Birmingham or parts of Manchester. It's without fail, it's the same thing is happening, but it's so frustrating to see that no one wants to do anything about it, unless, of course, you're Pauline Hanson or Rupert Lowe. These are few and far voices, but they're growing very rapidly. So to answer your question, yeah, I've been saying that for a long time. I knew that it's going to happen. And that is probably one of the reasons I actually got really interested in UK politics.
Yeah, I think you make a very good point when you bring up East London, because that's a case in point of exactly what happens. I mean, it's considered Little Bangladesh. We actually lament the fact that the true East Enders, essentially the working class Brits who put their blood, sweat and tears into making London and England what it is today, are no longer there. There's small pockets of them. I think there's, like, if you look in the borough of Newham, for example.
Even your accents have changed, haven't they? Even your accents have changed.
Oh yeah, like the Cockney slang of the East End, you barely hear it anymore. The pie and mash shops, the jellied eels, everything that the East End was like famous for and known is now just converted into more signs in Bangladesh and halal meat shops and rubbish on the floor. And there's, I think, one area of Newham and Poplar which still has the last remnants of the true East Enders. And again, this is just the shift that we've noticed in the last 50 years. This is like what parents would tell their children and grandparents would have told their grandchildren. And the shift is so drastic, so quickly. It's sad for me. And I don't even share that shared heritage or ancestry, but still to see how far it's come.
No, but let me ask you a question. How do you answer those people who said that, well, like even Piers Morgan has said it, well, accept it. That's just the future of England. It's evolved.
Look, I I despise that argument because no other, and I've actually commented this on so many of my videos, that no other country in the world is expected to accept this rate of demographic change at this pace and be okay with it. Like, it's almost asking us to, not accept reality and not comment on the change in reality that we're seeing. Why do native English people have to be so okay with being London is no longer a white majority? And people are saying, yeah, well, what's your problem? Why are you so racist? What's the issue if London is not a white majority city anymore? But that's mind-boggling to me, that the capital city of the United Kingdom is now more overpopulated with foreign immigrants or people who are ethnically not from here. That's a problem. Can you ask Malaysians to expect that, Kuala Lumpur is not majority Malaysian anymore? Could you expect Turkey or Ankara in Turkey to not be majority Turkish? No other culture would accept this. But yet it's forced down like the native English population's throats that if you notice this and if you comment on it, you're bigoted, you're far right. And this is why I have a serious problem here, because even Prevent, the counterterrorism organization, their definition of far right terrorism includes a conspiracy theory they call the Great Replacement, right? But how can you say the Great Replacement is just a theory when the sheer amount of white flight and the rate of demographic change is pointing to the fact that in 2060, if things carry on the way they are, by 2060 or mid 2050 even, England will be no longer white majority. That is mind-boggling. I don't know how you feel about that, Harris, but I'm glad that's why Pauline Hanson is like, she's very internationally aware as well of countries that have slowly become victim to Islam, but she's also looking at England and saying, I see what's happening there and I will never let this happen here. And we need people to be ahead of the game. Like, yes, it's all well and good. We've got Rupert Lowe. We've got even people like Tommy Robinson shouting these things from the rooftop. But in England, we're actually looking at it as the next election is our last chance to turn things round. Whereas, do you think in Australia you've got this time? Whereas, I mean, look at even what TalkTV's banner says, that Australia's Pauline Hanson rides the new wave of right-wing support. Like, do you think you've got time to put a stop to this now?
Yeah, look, I've long said that we're going to see it's all going to go off in England first, and that's going to become a case study for all the other Western countries to come up with a solution, because it's going to happen in the UK. We don't know which way it's going to go at this point. Starmer is going to be in charge. Well, maybe not him, but Labour Party is going to be in charge till what, 28, 29? We're going to see some major shakeups in the next general election, but it may not be as easy as we think. First of all, the right is divided. You got to reform and restore. But then there's another player that is rising very rapidly, which is Zach Polanski's Greens. I mean, they're giving me nightmares. And we thought that in the next general election, okay, the conservative right is going to get sweeping majority and they're going to come with some really harsh measures, because desperate times call for desperate measures. So now we're hoping that here in Australia, because our Tories, the coalition of the Liberals, they've fallen to the depths, really. Like, it's never happened. Australia has also been a two-party country for, I don't know, for at least 50 years. But we're going to have a new left as well. And we're going to have our Greens as well. I think you're familiar with Mehreen Faruqi. She's a Pakistani-born Australian senator.
Unfortunately, yes, I'm familiar with her.
So again, same thing. Like Zara Sultana, they hate they've got nothing nice to say about the country that has given them so much. Where is your patriotism? I don't even look at it as right or wrong. I just look at it, look, it was an inevitable consequence of mixing cultures that haven't gotten along with each other for centuries. These people have different values and consequently they have different expectations.
So I actually wanted to talk about that, Harris, because correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the lady that you mentioned, Mehreen Faruqi, is she foreign born? Was she born in Pakistan as opposed to Australia?
Oh, yeah. She was born in Pakistan, yeah.
Okay, so you guys have the same problem, because I genuinely believe that nobody foreign born should be able to hold a position of of power, especially when there's a conflict of interest like Islam. I even go as far as to say Shabana Mahmood is a Brahmi. She was born and bred in England, but I would also say like the conflict of interest with her religion and her public office is so stark that it troubles me. But I definitely don't think anybody foreign born should be able to hold a position of power. What do you reckon?
I agree with you. Desperate times call for desperate measures. But that alone wouldn't solve the problem because her son was born here, I think, and he's worse than his mother. And as you said, Shabana Mahmood, and there's so many people who are born there, but they have a conflict of interest. It's up until very recently, up until the advent of multiculturalism, people emerged from homogenous cultures, or even within, you could argue that big countries like China or India, they have their own mini subcultures, but again, they have lived within the proximity of each other for hundreds of years. So therefore, they have a better understanding of each other. Or they're not as hostile, or even if there is any hostility, both parties are aware of that. Here, in in the true sense of modern multiculturalism, most of these advanced societies, like mostly the West, because they're the only ones who opened up, they were caught off guard. They just expected that whoever comes in when a kid is born in Britain is just going to be like any other British person. Now, that was a major miscalculation. So even if you're born here for 2 or 3 generations, it's not going to change. It's not going to change anything. I think there should be. I think we have to change the culture. There has to be. You have to bring in pride in your national identity, in your cultural history, and your cultural values. All of those things have to be brought back into fashion. If you think it's okay to burn the Union Jack or the American flag or the Australian flag, or to act like a rebel, or just find flaws in your home country only, and that is coming at the expense of your native culture that your parents left behind 40, 50 years ago, then sorry, I think there's something's wrong. So the culture has to change. I don't know whether that would solve the problem or not. Like, hey, me, like I wasn't born in Australia. I have no interest in going to politics. And under this current climate, I would actually say, you know what? If I have to sacrifice myself and not run for office, you ban public office for all foreign born citizens, I'd be okay with that.
Very selfless of you, taking one for the team for the greater good of Australia. This is the kind of upstanding citizen the West needs and deserves.
It's easy for me to say that because I have no intentions of running for office
True.
anyway.
If you had a burning passion or desire for politics, you might,
Probably.
you might feel differently. But no, I absolutely agree. And I mean, in England, I don't know if it's more of like a really like far right, quite far to the right talking point, but some people even say that you shouldn't even if you've not got like English ethnicity going back 3 generations, 4 generations, you shouldn't be able to hold public office. Not sure I entirely agree with that, but I mean, I can see the merit to the argument because there are when even you describe Mehreen Faruqi's son, for example, what we're seeing then is that second, third generations are not getting more and more westernized or more pro-Australia. They're actually regressing. And that's an issue. And for me, I think in a country like England, or this extends to Australia, you should not be able to be sworn into public office on the Quran or on something which is directly in contradiction to the public office you're about to hold. And a case in point of this is Hamza Useless. He is such a stark representation of when you're so Islamic and you're so pro-Pakistan and pro-Palestine and everything wrapped up with your family and your personal heritage that, it is detrimental to the nation that you are holding office in. And I just don't think you should be able to be sworn in Urdu. We've got members of parliament being sworn in Urdu, putting their hand on the Quran to represent England. Now, make that make sense. So I really think you need to be able to, if you are foreign born, I think foreign born should not be able to hold public office. If you are a devout Muslim, you need to at some level say that I will put British interests above my religion, and British interests come before my religion to me, not the opposite, because what we're hearing is always the opposite and it's going left unchecked.
Some would argue that in that case, they'll be lying And that's what I meant
Yeah.
by, so if they're lying, then they're lying. They're liars everywhere. But that's what I meant by
Remember, Islam
changing.
allows you to lie for that reason as well, by the way.
Yeah, not quite, but I know how they can twist it in their favor. But that's what I meant by changing the culture. That right now there is no opposition. They openly and boastfully say that my religion comes first to me. Shabana
Yeah.
Mahmood said it, that my religion is an integral part of me. But however, she did, however, say that I don't believe that my religion can get in the way of my job as a politician. I just quickly want to share this Washington Post article with you. It is
Sure.
along the same line. This guy, who's again a Muslim, he's saying, why do Muslims need to be like everyone else? A case against assimilation. So they're making a case against assimilation. I am tired of proving I belong in America. Minorities don't need to show they're like everyone else. What do you think about that? So someone needs to tell them the reason you were welcomed into our great, successful, prosperous countries was the expectation that you will eventually integrate and assimilate into our way of life. That was the condition. That was always a condition. Integration and assimilation, these are Western words. These are the words of the same people who invented multiculturalism. But somewhere along the way, our politicians, it became either uncomfortable or they didn't want to talk about it, or they just were looking at the next general election and they were looking at their voter base. The conversation got lost somewhere. And now people are, and this is why Muslims are not the only people to say that. However, they're the biggest champions of, hey, I don't want to assimilate, I don't want to integrate. But sooner or later, other cultures are going to rise up too. And I think Douglas Murray made that point, or can't remember the name of this other guy, Rory Phillips, that we have imported these foreign grievances, these foreign cultures, foreign feuds, and they're just panning out. Ordinary Brits had no say in what should be Britain's policy towards Israel and Palestine, or on Kashmir, because you've got both Indians and you've got both Pakistanis. What happened to Britain's independent policy on that? So something really drastically need to change. And what you mentioned, that's just one of the steps. I say it's got to do some other things as well. Maybe ban halal slaughter, make things a little bit difficult. I don't know how you're
Yeah,
going to do it.
of course, what I mentioned is one of many things, but I also don't think, personally, I don't think banning halal is also the answer. It's one of many things you can do, of course, with a focus on animal welfare, as you know, the West stands by animal welfare. So, sorry, please end your barbaric practice of torturing animals to the point of death in this way. Cue all of the people saying factory farming and battery farming is just as bad. I just don't think Muslims will leave the country in their droves if you ban halal, personally, because there was a time in England when my grandparents were here in the late 60s. Halal was not so readily available. And you know what? Lo and behold, they didn't care for it. They ate meat
Right,
regardless, because you got to do what you got to do to, no, not even kosher. Sometimes, Harris, when you're an immigrant population into a country and both of you are working and you've got to make ends meet and you've got to just kind of deal with what is around you, you're not thinking about these religious edicts. They don't matter to you as much, because you just need to get on with your life and you need to just carry on with your day and be able to go to work. So my grandparents had many a years when they didn't eat halal, and you can just whisper Bismillah on top of the meat and it becomes halal magically. There's so many different loopholes that you can use to worm your way out of it. And even in Islam, it says if you're in dire straits or your life depends on it, you can even eat pork. So there's so many loopholes that Muslims would find to get around the halal thing. But as you're saying, one of many things, I think there needs to be a whole drastic scheme of measures.
Very quickly before, because it's related to the second and third generations being even more radical, or at least not having any change. Have a look at this. This is Motin Ali's father. He's wearing a suit and a tie. Can you see it?
Yes. Oh my gosh.
That's his mother. So I think they're Bengalis. So they were more looking to integrate than this, and this is the next generation, and
Look
than
at
their
the
children. You know?
regression. My
That's
God.
a regression, isn't it?
Absolutely. Next is going to
Well,
be the full face covered, and God knows he's going to, I don't know how much
so,
worse.
so so we can't blame Islam, yeah. So, I mean, it's because of Islam. Islam has made a strong comeback in the second and third generations of the immigrant community, and this is why I say in some cases, even mainstream Pakistani Pakistanis are not as radical as their counterparts in Britain.
Absolutely. And I would say the same thing for the Gulf countries as well, where I grew up. You know, they just don't take Islam as seriously as I will say this, as non-Arabs. So like the Bangladeshis, the Pakistanis, the Afghanis, they are very much more like, we need to double down on our religion and proving how pious we are and devout we are. And I think that is something there to a conversation to be had about being Arab and Islam being in Arabic and an Arabic religion, so to speak. And then you being non-Arab, you need to present yourself as more Muslim than Arab Muslim. So I think that's another conversation to be had. But again, also going hand in hand with maybe the identity crisis of second and third generation immigrants. I mean, I've spoken about this many a time, but I was very religious growing up in a casual suburb of London, which is crazy to me that moving to Saudi Arabia made me less religious than my time in London, and I'm very grateful for that. But
You
just
probably would have looked like Mutin Ali's wife had you stayed in London.
oh my gosh, I parallel world, can you imagine?
You probably would have been married to him.
Oh no, please, I would never, even no matter how pious I was, I would never have chosen him. His beard, I cannot cope. Anyway,
He's a cute little Humpty Dumpty, no?
those are not the words I would use to describe him, but sure. Oh gosh, I lost my train of thought now. Oh yes. So what I was going to say is, obviously, I made that point fleetingly that, you know, Harris is right. If somebody is being sworn into office and they are having to say that, obviously, I put British interests or Australian interests before my religion of Islam, they could very easily be lying. Mine, and I'm going to put my neck out on the line here and say, this is no way by any means me talking about Shabana Mahmood as a person, but in the wider scheme of what is happening in terms of the institutional capture and like more nefarious organizations like the Muslim Brotherhood with their kind of long-term plans of how to infiltrate, I can very easily see radical Muslims be very okay to lie. They would see no issue with lying and saying, you know, I'm British first and foremost. I put my religion second, just to further their cause. Because the whole point of this slow infiltration is that, you know, you get into positions of power and you do what you need to get into those positions of power. And there's many a doctrine within Islam where you can show a kind of, you know, a looser face of Islam, and you can even kind of lie about your true motivations and intentions to the disbelievers for your greater goal. So yeah, that's not an indictment of Shabana Mahmood, but I'm just saying there are, if you look at characters affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood, that you'd think, wow, I can't believe this person is holding on to these Islamic positions when, you know, you're holding public office in England and all you're banging on about is Gaza or Palestine or genocide, and you're very radical in your personal views, or like someone like Mutin Ali with a wife like that. They know Islam better than most people, what most people think is what I'm trying to say.
Shabana Mahmood might not be a closeted Islamist. I don't think she is.
Neither do I.
But I don't trust Mutin Ali.
Yeah, no, neither do I.
He knows what he's doing. And what I can't wrap my head around is what's wrong with people like Zach Polensky. I think they know, because apparently in these last Gordon and Denton election, they actually gave out pamphlets to the Muslim community in the local area that don't worry about the LGBTQ stance of the Greens, because for the greater good, we have to join forces. They actually gave out pamphlets telling people, and then you probably saw that guy who spoke like, oh, what is wrong with him? The Birmingham guy, he actually called them out. He called them out. He said, "Look at this! Look what they're doing! This is gay dancing, gay stripping." And
he only called them out when they were prancing around with the gay dancers on stage. But you're absolutely right, Harris, because I've actually made a video on this where they've said that this is how Muslims think in general, right? So what happened in Gorton and Denton was, don't worry about the whole LGBT alphabet soup issue, because our goal is to save our ummah, like the people of the Muslim ummah and our Muslim brothers and sisters around the world. The way to safeguard them in Gaza from the genocide is to vote for the Greens, because the Greens are against Israel and they oppose, Yeah, exactly.
Vote for gays,
But
basically.
the point what I'm trying to make is that it's very plausible for Muslims to suspend their beliefs for a greater goal in that moment than to hold on to some little thing that Islam prohibits. So you can side with the LGBT alphabet soup if it means that your brothers and sisters in Gaza will be saved because of the foreign policy that the Greens will push forward. And they say this openly. So don't Mohsin Ali is a walking example of this. He said there is a Mohsin Ali from the Green Party, and then there's the Muslim Mohsin Ali, and he wears two different hats. And you can see that those hats really get their knickers in a twist, where he wasn't there when Zach Palazzi and Hannah Spencer were dancing on stage, which was when obviously Ahmed Yaqub piped up. But do you see how even Mohsin Ali admits when he's asked difficult questions about what about Islam's views on, trans or homosexuality? He says, well, let me put my Green Party hat on. Absolutely fine. We care for their rights. But the one behind closed doors with his wife in a burqa and him and his beard and his
Flying off a
keffiyeh.
building.
Yes, exactly. For being a Jew and for being gay.
Yes, Jew. but do you think, I used to think that maybe it's just compassion overload, but no, these guys are not idiots. Well, they are idiots for their ideological views, but I think they both think that they're using each other. I think Zach Polinsky thinks that he's using the Muslim vote, and Mohsin Ali thinks that, you know what, like, I'm going to wait for my opportune moment and then I'm going to pounce when the time is right. But he can't be ignored, though. The Greens can't be ignored.
I just love watching it when this unholy alliance gets awkward in moments like the gay dancing on stage. I love it when, the awkwardness just comes to the forefront and it's like, oh, I'm here for it. I'm here for that with popcorn. Yeah.
Let me quickly share that another piece of news with you. So this guy I only found out recently. He's a British Pakistani, Aftab Malik, and he and our Labour Party hired him to, he's an Islamophobia envoy. So he actually wrote a manual on how to combat Islamophobia. So he made a recommendation to the Australian government on how to tackle Islamophobia. And I think some of that was used for hate speech laws.
You're importing British Pakistani recommendations on Islamophobia into Australia and using that to make your laws and determine what constitutes hate speech. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
And they're totally not related to each other. Yeah. Surely there's no communication between our Labour Party, your Labour Party, the Islamophobia, the same debate. It's literally, these guys are not even original. They're actually literally repeating what they've done in the UK before. And if the UK was some shining example of multiculturalism, past in flying colors, then sure, maybe we should learn something from the UK. But what's happening in the UK, whether that's been done with the good intentions or not, with the best intentions or not, we shouldn't be repeating that anywhere in the world, because that's proven to be a monumental failure.
Well, I think you'd be forgiven for thinking that Keir Starmer and your Albanese were like long lost siblings or something. They're just two peas in a pod.
They're twins. Yeah, two peas in a pod.
Absolutely.
Anthony Albanese does tone it down a little bit with his actually, no, he doesn't tone it down with far right. It's actually, that's pretty similar to how Keir Starmer was just like, remember when he first came in, when the Southport massacre happened, and then he was a far right, and then everyone started repeating that. So Albanese is doing that now. He's labeling Pauline Hanson a far right figure, and she's fueling the far right sentiment.
And that's why I'm so glad. This is exactly why I wanted to have this conversation with you today. And I was mentioning this like redemption arc, because I will show you some of the comments underneath here as well, if I can find them. People who have been saying like, I'm so sorry to Pauline Hanson. When I was in school, they fed me all of this, that you were the absolute monster, the face of racism in Australia. And now, because I realize how like much woke has infiltrated our institutions and how like the left has captured everything, we were fed that narrative. I'm so sorry, Pauline. You were warning us years ago when nobody else had the foresight. And I'm very grateful that she's being platformed, even in the UK, as somebody who's a serious figure to be taken seriously in Australian politics. And not just that, but the flurry of support for her, is why I wanted to chat to you. Is Australia moving? Are we seeing this kind of Overton window shift and Australia move to the right in general?
Pauline, being characterized as Islamophobic in your home country of Australia? We
Oh,
just lost Pauline Hanson. I think you'll agree, quite the most compelling conversation. And there are many people that will object to what Pauline Hanson has had to say about the Muslim population in Australia. Relatively small, 4%, but her concern is the impact it's having on democratic outcomes and Australian society. And she's right to point out that you have Muslim communities in the West who exist in a parallel way in terms of values, the language, sometimes even the rule of law. It's worth remembering that.
so Harish, just on that point real quick, because I've obviously had the pleasure to actually come down under now and see Australia for myself. And one of the things that actually shocked me was hearing of or seeing certain towns, like, for example, I think it's Bankstown in Sydney, which was so reminiscent of London's Southall or London's Green Street. And I was like, wow, so you've actually got like your areas, which could be, considered a Muslim area or Pakistani area. And then I think similarly in Melbourne, you've got suburbs which you think are more like Lebanese dominated, and there's mosques there, and you just see the kind of the general demeanor of the place looks different to what you would see, I guess, in the CBD or what,
Aesthetics go down. That's the first
Yes.
thing I've noticed.
I was trying
Aesthetics, for some
to
reason, they always go
tiptoe
down.
around that, but yes, absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
White areas, for some reason, they're clean, they're shiny, everything looks fresh, crisp. I don't know. You go to Broadmeadows, you go to Fawkner in Melbourne, you go to Bankstown or Lakemba. I don't know. Something looks off. And that's exactly what I
I remember
experienced in London.
driving through the suburbs as well, and when you're driving around and it's all nice and pretty and like pristine roads and like perfectly suburban tree-lined streets, and then you drive into it and you take a turn and you just see everything gets a bit more downtrodden.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, what's
Up
happened
there.
here? Yeah. So
It-
absolutely.
That
Go
guy,
ahead.
Ahmed Yaqub, you were talking about, he had a campaign photo from last year where he was saying we're going to change this city or something. And in the background, you can see a very dilapidated building. It's the same everywhere. Suddenly, you start seeing more rubbish flying around, more plastic bags flying around. I
Yeah,
don't
the
know. It's
green,
just
white, and red being painted on things, graffiti. It's an absolute, you know what? It's
culture
actually so
matters. Culture matters.
100%. And
We can't deny it now.
yeah, and I don't often say this, but it is actually very, very sad because I'm a born and bred Londoner, yeah. But when I think of like England's second biggest city, and you think of places like Birmingham or even Manchester and the history there, like for me, those two cities, large chunks of those cities are like when I think of them, and I could be completely wrong, but I just refuse to go there and see it for myself because of my stereotypical views that I've seen everywhere, that these communities are so dominated by Muslims or Asians that they've become reminiscent of streets of Pakistan or India or Bangladesh. And I'm quite frankly, I don't want to go there. Like when you think of Spark Hill in Birmingham, when you think of like Rochdale in Manchester, when you think of Telford, Oldham, these places, there's nothing that would draw me to them. I've mentioned Bradford before. I drove through it once because I had to and never again. But it was so indicative of everything that I had thought. Similarly, here in Southall, like I feel really awful because obviously we've got a housing crisis in London, and a lot of women who flee domestic violence, they want to still be housed within London and not move out of London. But I've seen that when they get put into boroughs like boroughs, well, not boroughs, but like places like Southall, in the borough of Ealing, for example, they come back even more traumatized, saying, I've got a culture shock. The streets are filled with rubbish. There's feces outside my door. It's just, and I feel for them 100%. Like a woman that's been traumatized and gone through so much, and then you put her in a situation like that, and because they're too polite, because she's not of Asian descent herself, she's like, it's just a culture shock. I don't feel safe. The men around me, I don't feel safe. I'm being leered at. And I'm not saying this is just a Muslim problem. We've got a massive problem with the Punjabi Sikhs and drinking and drugs. But when Southall, somewhere like that, becomes a melting point of all of that, it just becomes a write-off. Like you barely see a white person in Southall, to be honest. And I don't blame them because the white flight has happened. If you read the history of somewhere like Southall, it's got a 1,000-year plus history, which is so interesting. And now you look at it and it's an absolute dump. Yeah. Anyway, that was my little rant over because I actually...
Well, save your rant for this, because how are things going to improve when these people are running your councils? Have a look at this. So this is a political candidate for a council election. Let me play this video to you. This guy,
gosh.
this old grandpa who, I think he can't even speak Urdu, let alone English.
Harris,
They're
April Fool's
propping him
has
up.
passed, yeah? You're like what, 11 days late? Please tell me your joke.
You know, it's not just the praise of the people, it's not just the will of the people that makes a difference. But when you have a strong father, a strong shade upon you, then nothing can stop you from winning. You know, we're pleased Mr. Khan Senior is here, he's our elder, we all look up to him, he's made changes in Rochdale, and his son is about to bring a big change in Central on the 7th.
No, so his son is going to be
His
the
son, okay, I was going to
contestant,
say, he looks like he's
He-
about to keel over. Bless him, so, yeah.
He's about to kick the bucket. Maybe
Yeah,
he since has. But anyway, so
No,
still
but I mean,
not doing any
if
good.
you know, you
Still
would
not
think
any
that,
better.
yeah, no, exactly. And again, this is like the tribal mentality of somewhere like Pakistan being now exported to onto British streets, for example. Like it's very much reminiscent of something you would see in Pakistani politics, where the baton is passed from a father to a son, and you know the whole clan comes out or the village comes out in support of this one person, and then therefore like his son is the next in line to take his seat of
Ah.
power. In Britain, in the West in general, we operate societies as focused on the individual. Yeah, we've moved away from these tribal versions of politics. You are not who you are because of who you are. You are who you are because of what you stand for and what you represent and how you conduct yourself. On the streets of Manchester and Bradford and places like this in Birmingham, you see the clan tribal mentality still at work, and it's because you've imported droves of those people, as Mark Dolan was saying in this clip, that have set up parallel societies, and they think they can run the streets of Britain as they would be running them back home in Pakistan. It's very much the individual versus the tribal society coming to the forefront.
That's just ripping the social fabric of British society, and
Oh, yes.
nobody foresaw that. You made that point of Birmingham. Look at this. I actually made a video on this about a month ago. Have a look at this. Is an actual photo of Birmingham on the right, and on the left you can see Karachi.
Jeez. See, Harris, when I see that, do you think I'd ever gonna fancy jumping in my car and taking a trip to Birmingham, which is also the setting of Peaky Blinders, a show that I'm mad about. I absolutely love Thomas Shelby, Ada Shelby. I would love to go see the history of that, but Birmingham is so off-putting because of scenes like you've just shown us. So
There is no
it's
Thomas Shelby left there.
no, I know. Let's carry on.
After the awful October the 7th attacks in Israel, the very next day in Australia, in Sydney, of all places, there were thugs chanting, "Kill the Jews, kill the Jews." That's not acceptable in a free society. I'm delighted to say that Pauline Hanson is back. Pauline, have you been described as Islamophobic in the past? I think we may have lost. Oh, you're back. You're back. Sorry, Pauline. We had trouble with the line there.
Yeah,
where do you stand?
You need to fix your Australian Wi-Fi connections.
The accusation of Islamophobia or even racism, how do you respond to that, Pauline?
Look, I have been called constantly over the years, the last 30 years, because they can't combat my message.
Yeah.
And it's the only way they can shut me down. And that's why we've got to get over that. It is what they use all the time. You're Islamophobic, and we've moved hate speech laws in Australia to shut down. People have an opinion, and we've got to go against that. You have to stop it. You must actually stand against this. And I'll tell the people of Britain, stand up for you know who you are as a people, as a nation. You are British. Be proud of it, and don't let these people put you down. These politicians, if they think differently to you, then throw them out. Don't keep electing them. Get your country back.
Do you feel sorry for what's happened in Britain? Does it sadden you how the UK has played out? Is Britain a warning to the free world?
Most definitely it is. And it's been a big warning to me. And as I read the book of Ayaan Hirsi Ali, you know, she's an advocate of, say, open up your eyes, listen to what is happening around the world. and I've read, you know, other articles, and I see what's happening in Britain, and that's why I'm so adamant that I won't allow it to happen in Australia as long as I possibly can, and to wake people up to it. You know, it's about people power, and I keep saying it all the time, Mark. You know, these politicians, they're blinded by these to keep their seats in Parliament. They're not representing you, the people. And if they don't represent you, not by the values, you know, why did you lose so many people to go and fight for your country, for the democracy, for freedom of expression? Why not for the Christian faith? And that's what Britain is, Christian faith. Why do you allow these people to just walk over the top of you and tell you what to do, take away your country, can't fly the flag? You know, these are things that are important to the British people, and you must get the message across. Stop the brainwashing in your educational system, and that's what they're doing. They're teaching the Islam in your educational system, in the schools, that there's no problem, wear the hijab. To see hijab day, I couldn't believe it.
Yes, as a woman yourself, who is a passionate advocate of women's rights, Pauline, and someone that has prevailed in a still male-dominated political world, what do you make of young women being subjugated in that way, forced to cover their heads and treated as second-class citizens? Just on a human level, how does that make you feel?
I'm disgusted by it. You know, that's going back how many hundreds of years. I thought we'd move forward beyond that. Here they're in Australia pushing for women in corporate positions, same pay, same job, same pay. And that's very important that we actually do this. But the whole fact is, to allow this to go on with people being treated the way they are, female circumcision, you've got people, you know, females only worth half the value of a man, even coming to property rights or coming to the rights of your children. Why do women allow themselves to be put down by a religion or a belief? And it's an ideology. Why do we put up with that? Haven't we come far beyond that?
Well, you've been pushing back, Pauline, on male power for years, and yet here we go again, this time ushered in by the progressive left and even, mystifyingly, Pauline, by Western feminists.
Correct. And they're the ones that are not standing up for these women. I have spoken up for the people of Iran and these women. Do you know, when I did that, all the burqa in the parliament, I had the Iranian women write to me, this organisation said, good on you for sticking up for us, for fighting for us.
Just worth remembering for my audience that you entered the Australian Parliament in a burqa to make a political point.
Brilliant.
Yes, I did. I wore it twice. I wanted to ban the burqa and they threw it out. They wouldn't even allow me to introduce my private members bill. So I went up to my office and I put it on and I wore it down because I had it there because I wore it 7 years ago to prove a point, to stop, you know, in the Australian Parliament, there's no dress code. So anyone who gets elected could actually wear a burqa. There's no dress code. So I wanted to prove a point 7 years ago. So that's why I had the burqa. So I thought, well, you won't want to ban the burqa, I'll go and wear it. Well, that upset them all, didn't it?
Imagine.
So I was actually censured from Parliament for 7 days. I had to miss 7 sitting days of Parliament because I wore that burqa. And we're going so woke, Mark, in Australia, and you've got to constantly keep pushing back and push back all the time. And they have no argument against me. You know, it's just this left, the ideology of the left, and it's happened all around the world. But I believe that the people now behind me, I've been consistent with it. I've, you know, spoken up time and time again. And that's what I say to the people of Britain. You know, if you have an opportunity to vote for someone who's really is proud to be British, proud of the country, wants to represent you, then you've got to get behind them.
And to protect what made your country great in the first place, Pauline, where your message is resonating, because it's my understanding that on polling day on the 21st of March of this year, you had quite an extraordinary success. 4 seats, I believe, in the lower house, which is a big breakthrough, 3 seats in the upper house, and almost a quarter of the vote, 23% of the vote. So you've got momentum.
We have got momentum, and the polling is showing that since the end of last year, that the Australian people are prepared to vote for one nation in Australia. And the latest poll that's come out today, who would best deal with immigration. It was One Nation on 40%, the Labor Party, who's now government at 19%, and the Tories, we call them Liberals, but it's Tories in your country, on 14%. So the people are starting to wake up that One Nation is the party who will deliver good governance for the people of Australia moving forward as a nation and protect our nation, protect the people, look after people with good policies. And I think it's very important. Yes, we had that win in South Australia, but there is a momentum that's happening in Australia and people want change. They're fed up, the major political parties that have signed these international treaties and agreements, that it's not in the people's best interest. And when I see people living in poverty, they have no future, there's no pride in their nation, who they are. People want change.
They most definitely do. And your message is resonating here in the UK because I've got a message here from Michael who says, good morning, Mark. Pauline, I absolutely love you. My cousin is in Australia. I keep an eye on what's happening to that country. Go, girl. This from Jackie. I'm sat in my caravan watching the waves roll onto the beach. The sun is shining, listening to TalkTV, enjoying every second. Jackie, for that. Thank you for that. Hanson for Queen. I love Pauline, says Mark in Southampton. So on point regarding Islam. We need to wake up soon. Another texter, Pauline is a hero. Have a great Easter. Suze, Pauline Hanson's every word is correct. Your comments resonate across the West, which for some reason has chosen cultural and economic suicide, Pauline.
Yeah, the people of the West, you know, the public are actually waking up to all this. And
just to stop there real quick, do you see how her words now are echoing all the way here, where people in England are like so pro
And it's not just
Pauline?
her. Yeah, but there is a trend that you have to look at. There, people on the right side of the political aisle of all these countries tend to agree on pretty much every single topic, whether that's foreign policy or your policy towards how to deal with multiculturalism or Islam, whether that's in America or Canada or Britain or Australia. The right wing shares its views with their fellow right wingers in other countries, and it's the same for the left as well, though. So there's a global left and there's a global right, and that's why you're seeing this crossover of politicians from similar side of the aisle. So we're going to so nationalism, I think, is dying, even though nationalism is a conservative viewpoint, and even though people on the conservative side do believe in preserving their borders. But when it comes to siding with Trump, who is supposed to be the right-wing leader of the free world, whether you're a Brit or an Australian, you prefer Trump over your local or over your own prime minister, more or less. I mean, it's an observed phenomenon. Everyone is. I'm observing that.
Yeah,
Don't you see that?
No, I think you're correct there. Yes, there is a global right, and in that sense, and they just, they agree to mostly what the overall policies are, and it's to varying degrees of how to implement those policies is kind of where they diverge ever so slightly. But it's just, for me, it is still groundbreaking to hear voices like Pauline Hanson, who would even 10 years ago have appeared quite radical in her stance. I mean,
The window shifted.
yes, absolutely. And
that's happened everywhere.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
for good reason.
Oh, yes, exactly that. I mean, this is what I'm saying. I don't think even 10 years ago, she'd be invited onto a platform like TalkTV. And, we didn't even have platforms really that were on the right of the center discussing these things, to be honest. So there has been a massive shift. And I think it's the patriots of these respective Western countries are all rising up and looking to these demonized figureheads who were putting their head above the parapet when these things were unsexy or untrendy to say. And I think that's kind of the last.
Dangerous to say. They were even dangerous to say.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. And I think this is what we're coming up to right now as this video ends with Mark Dolan. I think he compares Pauline Hanson to Nigel Farage, and I just wanted to get your...
What they've been fed and they've been suppressed, because you can't say anything because you're called racist, or you're going to be put down, you're Islamophobic, whatever the argument is. And what I keep saying, I keep fighting back, Mark. I've been in this game for actually, I was elected 30 years ago on the 2nd of March. And I was out of politics for 18 years and I got back elected in 2016. I have a responsibility to the Australian people to speak my mind without fear or favour, and I will continue to do that. I love my country, I love my Australian people, and they're looking for truth and honesty and integrity from their politicians, and I deliver that with the politicians that get elected under the banner One Nation. So, I say to people around the world in Western countries, we can make a difference, we can change it, you can get your country back, but it's up to the people power.
Pauline, you're a person of extraordinary courage and principle. Do your loved ones and family members worry about you sometimes, given the very high personal price that you're paying for that courage?
My children are always concerned about me and my well-being, but my daughter now has got into politics. She's 42 years of age. So anyway, she now works for the party. She stood at the last election, just missed out on a seat. So hopefully the next election, she'll win her Senate seat and I will win my Senate seat. And the first time in the federal parliament, you'll have a mother and daughter on the Senate team in the federal parliament. But it's about, I can't back down, Mark, because too many people back down because of fear, what's going on. And if you allow people to put fear over you, nothing will change. We've got to fight that. I don't put my life on the line like the people did who went to war in the First or Second World War and other wars that we faced. They really went to war and put their lives on the line. I don't do that. My job now is to speak up on the floor of Parliament and carry on their fight for our freedom and our democracy, and most importantly, our freedom of speech.
And Pauline, briefly, what keeps you going? You've been attacked relentlessly, but you're winning the argument electorally. What keeps you going when you wake up in the morning?
Mark, I've had some ups and downs in my life, especially with politics, and I was in prison for 11 weeks in maximum security, and that was in 2003, and people wouldn't know that. But anyway, I thought I'd have rocks in my head ever get in politics again, but I did. And you know what? The greatest thing that I have is I might get a letter or a phone call to my office and people are in dire straits and, distressed and can't get answers and anything happening for them, or maybe on the verge of being deported from the country. And I step in and I actually do something for them, whereas they're at their wits' end. They don't know who else to contact. And just doing those little things to help people, give them some comfort in their life, I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. And that's my job. That's what I signed up to, is to work for the people.
Pauline, it's been a deep privilege to have you on the programme. More power to you. Thank you for your courage, because your fight is our fight too. My thanks to Pauline Hanson, leader and founder of One Nation in Australia, who are now boasting 23% support within the Australian electorate, often described as Australia's Nigel Farage. Your reaction to what Pauline Hanson has had to say?
Okay, so this is what I wanted to ask you about, right? Because he's just made it. By the way, she's amazing. I'm actually very kind of in awe of her. But he made this somewhat, I think, lazy comparison to Nigel Farage, because for me in recent years, Nigel Farage has really severely backtracked on, his...
He goes with the wind.
Absolutely, like flip-flopping comes to mind. But in terms of like his views and the things that he said about the rate of demographic change and that we should just accept it, and things like that, which
clarified it.
Doesn't stand on conviction.
He still hasn't clarified that position. He doesn't have what it takes to tackle Islamism or this glaring problem of Islamists. And
exactly. And obviously, like he's also completely not stood for banning the burqa or even considering banning halal, things like that. He's hired a bunch of Muslims as part of the Reform Party, which is okay, but stand on business when it comes to Islam or Islamism, for argument's sake. And he couldn't even do that. Whereas Pauline Hanson's actually, I didn't even know it was a maximum security jail, but she's been to jail. So in that sense, in terms of like the sacrifice she's made, she's kind of gone through similar things that Tommy Robinson has gone through in terms of being put in jail for the views that he holds. And then also she's in politics. So she's actually, been able to, like she said, come back and now she's got 23% of the electorate. So what do you make of his comparison to Nigel Farage, and do you agree with that?
Lazy. No, it was lazy. As I said, Nigel Farage seems more opportunistic to me. And as we
Mm.
said, I think he just goes with the wind and he hasn't clarified his stance. There's a glaring problem of Islamism or Islam, and he doesn't want to do anything about it. Zia Yusuf, Rupert Lowe, we've seen that feud. I don't know what's going on. I know reform is still leading in the polls, but if I were British, I don't think I'll be voting for reform. Rupert Lowe seems like a good option, but even that is mild. You have to, like, this has to be the absolute minimum that you'd need to start from to basically what he's saying. I don't know. Most of it can't actually be practically done, and you need a big majority, but at least, again, it puts the pressure back on the system that the way things have been going, they can't go on like that. So no, it's a lazy comparison. I don't like that. But who cares? It's not that big a deal.
Yeah, no, I just also think because that's when I also think the name Tommy Robinson is banned from channels like GB News and even Talk TV, and I think
Pauline
that's why
wasn't
he
banned,
Pardon?
but Pauline wasn't banned. I think Pauline's comparison with Tommy Robinson is also not a good
No, I
one.
was going to say, I think that's why Mark Dolan had to make the comparison with Nigel Farage because they don't want to give any wind to Tommy Robinson. That's so they're not allowed to say his name.
Oh. But there is a global right. So you're going to see a lot of overlapping. You're going to see a lot of exchange of ideas, a lot of similar policies that people are going to be agreeing on because we have a similar problem. We have a same problem. Like every single Western country has the same problem. It's Islamism first, Islam or Islamism, and then multiculturalism in general. Okay, just in general. I know that the Islamists are the loudest and the most obnoxious ones, but there's some other cultures too that are saying things that are not respectful to the native culture, to the local culture. And I don't know who's advising them either. I don't know whether that's just the next logical evolutionary step of liberal societies. I don't know what that is, but we are heading towards a massive social cultural clash, and I don't know how it's going to pan out. And it's not going to be an easy road either. Don't think that reform and restore, even if they ally themselves, then they're going to be able to bring about a change. There's going to be a new left. Green, as wacky and as batshit crazy Zach Polanski is, he is a force to be reckoned with. His idea. He's not that brilliant. I don't think he's that brilliant, but the viewpoints that he's representing, they are very popular amongst young people. They're deluded. They're and maybe you can blame our current system because if people can't buy property that they could for the last 50, 60, 70 years, young people are suffering unemployment. The economy hasn't been doing well because they thought that if we bring in people and into welfare societies, then somehow everyone's going to be rich. Well, it didn't work out. And
Yeah, I mean, look, he's not insanely charismatic or anything, but in his slightly charismatic way, he says talking points which of course people who are literally struggling to make ends meet are going to be like, yes, let's stick our middle finger up to the system. Let's go against the
like
establishment.
Mamdani, free
Exactly.
housing. But when they come
Yeah.
to power, everyone gets taxed.
Yes, exactly. So I mean it is scary, but let's wait and watch. We've got a few years to see how this all plays out. As they say, a week is a long time in politics, and every week some things are going on which are just beyond what your wildest imagination. I mean, so let's see what happens on that front. Obviously, we've got Restore as the new player in the game as well.
We're going to have a general election before you in 2028. We only have 3-year terms. I don't think Pauline's going to win, but she's going to emerge as a major political force, hopefully in the opposition, or she's going to have a lot more seats than she's ever had. I think this is the first time she'll be standing elections in every constituency, which is rare for a minor party. She's not a minor party anymore. So I think that is also going to be a good learning curve for people observing what's happening in Australia, and they could try to replicate that in the UK. Because at the end of the day, these countries are very similar, and as I said, because our problems are very similar, therefore our solutions have to be somewhat similar. There has to be some harmony in our solutions amongst
Okay.
right wing parties.
Yeah, no, very well said. And again, it was a a nice bit of positivity coming out of Australia, that there is this rising wave of patriotism. But I'm glad that I could go through that video with you and get some insights from somebody on the ground. So thank you always to the wonderful Haris Sultan for coming on and shedding light on what's happening down under.
Thank you.
Thank you all for watching, if you watched this far. And until the next video, take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Like these videos and want to support me in my activism, then you can support me on Patreon or PayPal. Stay free, everyone.